Hey guys, I wanted to do a video on free grace theology. So obviously I used to be a really big proponent of free grace theology. I was probably one of the biggest free grace websites that existed beyond faithalone.org, which is Grace Evangelical Society's website. I was faithalone.net, and I used to have a free grace commentary in my topical article section, and so on and so forth. I defended it for pretty much my entire Christian life after getting saved. And that was kind of my main identifier. And this article that I wrote after leaving Christianity, obviously, that talks about John and how John put his own words and theology into the mouth of Jesus of Nazareth, is kind of the death knell of free grace theology, or any defense of free grace theology, because obviously if you're familiar with free grace theology, almost the entirety of the soteriology passages that come from the mouth of Jesus are all from John, in John's gospel. There's nothing at all in the synoptics where Jesus says something that would be clearly free grace. In fact, instead of being pro-free grace, almost everything Jesus teaches soteriologically in the synoptic gospels is anti-free grace and needs to be explained by free grace theology. And I'm very familiar with those explanations because, again, I wrote a big long commentary on every single possible passage that someone could bring up. And frequently what I did was, yes, appeal to the Gospel of John, but also the epistles. But notice those things are not reflective of Jesus of Nazareth. That's not what Jesus of Nazareth said. That's what his followers later on said, the conclusions that they came to. And of course, if you view the epistles as divinely inspired, there are plenty of problem texts in those epistles as well. But the primary issue for free grace theology and calling it an honest attempt at trying to understand the New Testament is that there are so many things in the synoptics that were clearly meant to teach some form of a works-based justification before God. And reinterpreting all those, or trying to find a way to nullify them, is a noble pursuit if you think that the New Testament is consistent with itself, which you do if you're a Christian. But it's ultimately a dead end because the texts are simply not consistent with each other. And so trying to find a way to understand all of Matthew, Mark, and Luke in light of John, or vice versa, doesn't work. I think at times, John, the person that we call John, whoever wrote John's gospel, and 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, I think that at times he probably meant to convey something like free grace theology. And so I don't think that it's necessarily a twisting of what he wrote, but there are plenty of problem texts in the Gospel of John, and also in 1 John especially. 1 John has a pretty much constant barrage of problem texts for the free grace position, because he was flaky on it. Whoever this guy was very flaky on teaching soteriology. He was a very unclear communicator. And so all this to say that, yes, free grace is a misrepresentation of the New Testament's teaching on soteriology, but pretty much every soteriological stance is a misrepresentation of the New Testament's soteriology because it's not coherent. Instead, it's a bunch of authors contradicting each other, being inconsistent with themselves. And so, however noble the person is who attempts to undertake, to understand what they're saying and trying to communicate about how to go to heaven, they're ultimately going to fail because there is no answer. You're going to run into a brick wall where you simply have to face the music that these texts are inconsistent with each other and themselves. And so, yes, free grace theology is dishonest, but basically every soteriology is dishonest if you mean to say this is what the New Testament teaches, because the New Testament does not teach a coherent, singular soteriology. It's very dependent on the whims of whoever's writing and apparently what mood they were in when they wrote the particular chapter, because I think there are things in Ephesians 5 which contradict Ephesians 1 and 2 and other things that were supposedly written by Paul which contradict what Ephesians chapter 2 says, if in fact Paul wrote Ephesians, and obviously that's contested. So just wanted to say that because I know I promoted free grace theology and there's soteriology when I was a Christian, but I now regret that. But I was in pretty much a no-win situation. That's how I view it now, because I don't think there was an answer to be found. So just want to say that. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.